chatting cozies, cozy mysteries.
Hello and welcome to the Chatting Cozies podcast. I'm your creator and hostess, Angela Maria Hart. You may know me as @WriterAHart over on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and TikTok, and Books Are My Heart on YouTube. However, I am best known as the one behind everything Cozy Mystery Book Club, YouTube's very first cozy mystery book club, sleuthing as a family since 2017. In addition to the monthly YouTube livestream discussions, the last Tuesday of the month every month, there's the Cozy Mystery Book Club podcast, and of course, the Chatting Cozies podcast. Today I'm happy to share an interview I conducted with cozy mystery author Peggy Ehrhart. For the Cozy Mystery Book Club, we read the first book in Peggy Ehrhart's Knit and Nibble mystery series, Murder, She Knit. To learn more about Peggy's writing style, her ongoing cozy mystery series, and some knitting fun, please keep listening.
We're chatting cozies, cozy mysteries.
Well, we read book one in this series for the book club, and you have one of my favorite titles, The Murder, She Knit.
The editor thought of that. And
You're the reason why I was wearing the pullover today. So we have
it's perfect.
Murder, She Wrote, Murder, She Knit. It had to happen.
Yeah, my editor thought of that, and it was perfect to kick off the series, especially because it's a knitting series, and we've got the sleuth who knits and who solves murders.
And you also incorporated the knitting needle into something.
Yeah, I thought for the first one, I have to just let it all hang out. You might say, okay, it's about knitting. Well, let's put knitting everywhere we can think of.
I also love that you have the knitting group.
Oh,
I love that you took knitting, which is probably more of a solitary activity, and you turned the knitting into a community. And the community with those characters, each of them had their own backstory, and there was a lot more to these characters with some of them.
yes. Well, the press got that idea for the knitting club. And I'm one of these very fortunate people who was actually approached by an agent who had an idea that the press was looking for. I had already published a couple of mysteries on a different theme, and so my work was out there, and I had a website for the other books, and I had samples of my writing on the website.
Yeah.
And it's all networking, because what else can I say? I had been at conferences where this agent had been present, and I had friends who were writers who were actually working with this agent.
Yeah.
And so he is very close with Kensington, my agent, and sells an awful lot of things to them. And he's great pals with one of the editors.
Oh, wow.
And so he gets together with the editor and, what are you looking for now? And, what's on your mind? If you could find it, you would just grab it up. And the editor said, well, how about a knitting club? And the agent that became my agent said to himself, maybe I can recruit someone to a knitting club. And so he asked some of his other authors I'm in northern New Jersey, and there's sort of an author cluster there because it's close to Manhattan.
True.
And he asked around, do any of you know another writer who'd be interested in taking on a project? And that's how he was referred to me. And as it happens, I do knit. I started knitting when I was in high school. I had just recently taken it up again, as if some force in the universe was saying, start knitting again. An agent is out there looking for you.
Well, as soon as you said that the idea came from another source, I was thinking, well, originally I sort of was picturing you knitting and the idea sort of struck you. So I'm glad that a knitting idea found someone who was a knitter. It's like we're keeping it in the community.
Oh, exactly. And, there are a whole lot of knitting mysteries out there, as you probably know. But there's probably about 5 or 6 other authors with different presses who do these knitting-focused mysteries, but they're not all necessarily clubs. And so that was part of what set this apart. But also just that idea, if readers like knitting mysteries, they're not going to say, I already read my knitting mystery for the year.
Yeah.
They're going to say, here's another one. Let's see what this author has to do with that topic.
I think the same thing is true of the bookstore cozies and the library cozies.
Absolutely.
If that's what you're looking for, the more the better.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you've been very prolific when it comes to this series, which is very impressive. I'm going, clearly people are reading it and enjoying it, and they're coming back for more.
Enjoying it.
Your covers, there's something unique about them where when it comes to cozy mysteries, we see our animals on the cover, we see our cats and our dogs, but the cats that you have are typically doing extraordinary things on the cover, and they make me smile and laugh. So for example, we have a little leprechaun inspired hat and outfit, and
Yes, this artist, his name is Peter Antonsson, because in Iceland their names all end with son or daughter. It's very cool. If it's a woman, her name ends in daughter. And he must really like cats because he really gives them personalities. It's not just, oh, they said to draw
exactly.
a cat. Yeah.
That's a good way of saying it. They have their personality, and it comes across, and it entices you as the reader. You're going, I want to learn about this cat. I need to go read this cozy mystery. And so I love the fact that they're so prominently featured, but at the same time, you know that other things are going on, and they have the details in the background. So I was very impressed with the covers for your series in particular.
Yeah, yes, I love them. I'm always anxious. I get emails from my editor when there's a new cover, and he always says something like, adorable cover, and then there's something to click on to open the image, and then there it is, and it's
so
adorable.
Cute.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that the covers come through every time, because again, you don't want to say you judge a book by its cover, but you are at least enticed by the cover, and you have very enticing, intriguing book covers.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I love the titles that you have.
Well, some of them, as I said, my editor, he came up with Murder She Did. Some of them I come up with. This one we had a hard time with. We had to get everything in there. They love to get murder, death, or dying into the title. It has to have some allusion to knitting or wool or something. And then you have to have something dire, so you know it's murder. So for the Christmas one, which was the fourth one, I came up with that silent knit, deadly knit.
I love that one.
That was, yeah, he liked that. And that you get Christmas because it echoes the title of a Christmas carol, but you can then get in deadly, you can get in knit. And Knit of the Living Dead, that was the Halloween one. He thought of that, but I got the idea to make it Halloween. He just sometimes just throws out a title with no particular book in mind. And I said, I really like that, but could we do it for Halloween? Because that really fits. So that was his idea, Knit of the Living Dead. That, you can't cringe too much at puns.
I love them.
Spend your life cringing when you look at these books.
They make me so happy, though. They always make me smile. And I love that you have that collaborative experience going on, and everyone's being so supportive and contributing what they can to help make this the best book series they want. I mean, I love that. I love that they're supportive. I love that you have your idea, his idea, because it's just, there's a really nice way about that. It just makes me smile, and I like hearing things like that.
Well, he's a wonderful editor. He really has that ability to keep you very upbeat about your own work. If there's something that needs to be changed, he certainly isn't afraid to tell you that, because the press wouldn't be successful if they're just letting everybody do anything that isn't going to turn out to be what they need. But he's very good at giving direction and always letting you know if he's pleased with it. And I've actually only seen the man in person twice, but the email communications, and then he must have spent his life, he reads these manuscripts so fast. And I know a couple of other people who publish with Kensington, and he's their editor also. John is his name. And they say the same thing. How on earth can he turn these things around so fast? Yeah. So he must, every weekend, I'm sure he's just sitting there reading. Because sometimes I'll submit something maybe on a Thursday, and then he'll say, got it, get back to you soon. And then Monday morning, there's the email. Oh, yes, we like it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a quick turnaround time.
Yeah.
Or maybe you guys just write so well, he's just engrossed in the story and he has to keep reading.
Well, that's what he claims. And as I said, he's always very, very flattering and encouraging. Yeah.
I love that. So I am curious though, because I feel as if I know you best for this series. If you have other cozy ideas that are kind of on the back burner, you're thinking, oh, someday, or you have your little side pet projects that you're working on.
Well, Kensington actually has just sort of hinted at they might like me to keep this going, but do a spin-off.
Oh.
So it would be its own series, but it would be involving spinning off some characters from this.
That's nice though. That's very complimentary that they enjoy your characters.
I know it's very complimentary. So it would be one or two members of the knitting club who now are off on their own, and they would have to move away.
Yeah.
I pointed that out and he agreed, because if they're living in Arborville too, then wouldn't they just come to Pamela and say, here's this murder we're trying to solve?
Yeah.
It has to be separate enough, so I'd have to find some reason for them to want to move away, far enough away they could have their own crime-solving territory, let's say. And as you know from reading a lot of cozies, location.
Mm-hmm.
It has, I feel it has to be a cute, cozy town. I know there are cozies that aren't necessarily cute, cozy towns, but to me that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I've been very open about the fact that this is the town that I live in. I just gave everything a different name.
No.
And the house she lives in is exactly like my house.
Well, that also makes it much easier to get those details
Well,
correct and remember them.
Well, exactly. And you can really bring it to life.
Yeah.
And I know authors are supposed to have imaginations, but you can only push it so far. And so why not use what you can use that's real? So my editor and I were kind of brainstorming where else could it be that would be an interesting, cozy town far enough away that I was actually familiar with.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, I live in northern New Jersey, and that's where Arborville is, close to the George Washington Bridge.
Yeah.
And sometimes I even send my characters into Manhattan. Not that often, but sometimes. But I was thinking, way in southern New Jersey, there's that Cape May area.
Okay.
Which is adorable.
Yeah.
It's on the shore. It's an old Victorian town.
So you would still keep them in New Jersey.
Yeah.
I was picturing going, oh, is she going to move them to the middle of America? Is she going to move them to Maine, the other direction? Where are they going to end up?
Well, I had to have it be someplace I was vaguely familiar with. And my husband and I love to travel around in New Jersey, and we've been to Cape May, which is how I knew about it. So if this was going to happen, of course we would go down there again and spend some time and try to absorb more of the atmosphere. Exactly, yeah. So that's a possibility, but it's in the future. And then there also, there are the novellas. Periodically does a holiday-themed novella collection.
Yep.
It's 3 novellas, and each novella is about a third as long as a full-length book. So about 25,000 to 30,000 words.
Yeah.
And so they recruit 3 of their authors, and it's a theme that we don't pick, they pick it. The first one was Christmas card murder, and so the theme for each of the novellas would be something involving a murder that involved a Christmas card.
Yeah.
And then there was Christmas scarf murder. There have been other ones I haven't been in.
That's a lot of writing to get done.
It is a lot, but I got the writing habit when I was in grad school, because you had to be self-disciplined or you would never get your work done.
Yeah.
So I really got a good habit, I guess. And
what was your degree in?
Oh, English. I have a doctorate in medieval literature.
I think I remember seeing that in your bio, because I'm getting my PhD in communications, and I was excited going, oh, she has the title.
Where are you studying?
I'm getting my degree in American. So I lived in DC for the last 8-9 years because I got my first master's at Georgetown, and I got my second master's in American, and I've been staying there to do the PhD.
Fantastic. Yeah, it is a lot of work, but I don't emphasize it because I'm a mystery writer now, but it's nice to have a PhD after your name. And then people even sometimes call you doctor. I guess I find a use for it all in different ways eventually.
I mean, it's quite a different career path from being in the PhD and getting your doctorate and studying medieval is, I mean, that's a very different realm than writing the sewing cozy mysteries. So what made you decide to become a writer?
Well, I won an essay contest in 3rd grade.
No.
And you can never put that behind you, because then forever after people say, oh, you're the writer. And so, so they just expect that of you.
Yeah.
And I was always a reader, of course.
Mhm.
If you're a reader, you tend to be kind of introverted and focused more on words and ideas
Yeah.
than focused outward. And I was never good at sports. I was always afraid the ball was going to hit me. And
Sounds about right.
So it just became somewhat inevitable. And I always read a lot of fiction, of course.
Mhm.
And in grad school, I started reading mysteries as a relaxation from reading the more serious things, especially if you're studying medieval literature. It's all pretty deep. And I started reading mysteries for fun.
Yeah.
And at some point, I just thought, okay, it would be fun to write fiction. And mysteries are probably more saleable than deciding you're going to be the next William Faulkner or something.
Literary fiction is definitely hard to break into.
Yes, literary fiction is definitely hard to break into. So I thought, well, let's give a mystery a try. There's certainly a market for them. Any library you walk into has its own mystery section. Bookstores have their own mystery section.
Although now I'm curious how you decided on cozy versus the traditional or less cozy thriller-esque mysteries.
I would always have been focused on traditional, that British style, the Dorothy Sayers, Agatha Christie, of course, those Father Brown mysteries. The traditional mystery style is the puzzle style, and often you never even see blood or even a murder weapon. Sometimes it's all about how can you really fool the reader with these clues and keep them surprised at the end. So you have to put in very obvious clues that turn out to be red herrings. But it seems so obvious. Oh, this person must have done it. Because look, he had this motive and he had access to the murder weapon. He has to be the one. But then at some point you give him an ironclad alibi, and then the reader's thinking, uh-oh, guess it wasn't him. Who else could it be? But meanwhile, you have to be sneaking in little hidden clues. So that when the reader gets to the very end and finds out who it really was, if the reader was to go back and reread the whole thing, they'd say, oh, look how sinisterly tricky she was. She put that in there, and then she distracted me with some whole other thing, so I didn't pay attention to that. But that was the clue I should have noticed.
I'm trying to kind of phrase this as the question. So you've written a number of cozy mysteries. How do you approach crafting that puzzle? Because I'm curious, from your point of view, are you doing it in a narrative format, going from beginning to end? Are you trying to jump around so you can place those clues? How do you craft the mystery? Because you have to do this again and again and again. So how do you keep it fresh for yourself and for the readers? Because you always have to kind of think up new tricks.
I make outlines, very detailed. My editor likes outlines, and I always give him an outline first. And he always looks over it, and then he says, go ahead and write it. He's never said, no, this is terrible, try again, thank goodness. No, he always says, oh yeah, sure, great, and get going, and then I get going. But the outlines can be very long, like 10 single-spaced pages or more.
Oh, wow.
And it's really at that point that I'm creating the story. And I set my outlines up day by day. My books the plot usually takes place over about a week, 2 weeks and a half or so. Because I have to fit in those meetings of the group where they can talk about the mystery. So when I'm making the outline, on my computer, I create a file and I just put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday like that. And then I try to fill in what's happening on those days. But before I do that, I make lists of possible suspects. First, I have to decide who gets killed. That's really the first thing that has to happen. You have to figure out who gets killed.
How do you determine which character is getting the axe in this book?
I just try to think of, well, for this one, I mean, it wouldn't be a spoiler because it says it right on the cover. the person who gets killed is this very eccentric Arborville character whose family has lived there forever, and she's been a black sheep who comes and goes, and she's been a singer in bands, and now she's 70, but she's still just hopping along as eccentric as ever. So I just thought of that as a character. I thought that would be a funny and interesting character, and I can link her with Arborville by having her be the black sheep of the Arborville family. And so then I started seeing her in my mind, Isabel, with the sort of bleached blonde hair and the spike heels, even though she's 70 and still singing her heart out at any gig she can get.
Oh.
And so I thought, it's St. Patrick's Day, so let's have a St. Patrick's Day event at the senior center, and she's singing, and let's have her somehow turn out to be dead there. Part of what I think it's fun to do if you're writing cozy mysteries set in a charming town is think of locations and events that are very iconic to a small town, and then put a body there. So it's, and you know, nobody gets scared in these books, and they're not supposed to get scared. So just the incongruity. Here we are at the Senior Center St. Patrick's Day luncheon, entertainment of someone singing classic Irish songs.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there's a dead person in the back room. So then once I came up with her as a character, then I asked myself, what various reasons would people have for killing this person? And then I make lists of my potential suspects. And I try to give people names fairly early. Somehow once they have names, they're coming to life a little bit more. But yes, it's really that. It's think of who's getting killed first. Think of who the real killer is. And then think of all the other people that could have been the killers. And really, once you have that, you're very well on your way to having the whole plot in your mind.
Yeah.
Because in these stories, most of the plot is talking to suspects. Yeah.
I am kind of curious because when it does come to cozy mysteries, you don't want to miss the victim too much.
No.
So how do you go about making a victim who's intriguing, yet also you're not going to shed a tear over this character leaving the series?
Well, it seldom would it be an ongoing character who gets killed. It can sometimes be, well, often it's someone that nobody knew very well, because what you're doing with a puzzle mystery is the puzzle is the more essential thing, and the fun of the puzzle is more essential than the kind of heartbreak of this person has been killed.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And it can be someone that potentially you could care about, but you actually never get to know them, because the real formula for this style of mystery is the body in the first chapter. So you haven't had scenes where you get to know and love this person. You just discover the person after they're already gone, in fact.
Yeah.
And you learn more about them as the sleuth is trying to solve the mystery, of course, because that's part of how the mystery could be solved. Well, who was this person? Who did she know? What did she do?
Yeah, I was thinking about book 1 where we see her once before we find the dead body and going, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was kind of sad because she was a sympathetic character. Yes.
Again, you get to have some fun with the murder weapons, and you have to mix that up throughout your narratives so that each story is unique.
I try to bring in yarn and knitting needles and that sort of thing as much as possible. Ideally, every clue that actually solves the mystery would involve yarn or knitting, but I just can't always find a way to do that. But I also sometimes have the solution, the kind of last puzzle piece, you know, all of a sudden my sleuth Pamela thinks, yes, of course that was it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have that come from one of those articles she reads for the magazine. So she reads and edits articles for a crafts magazine. So often she's reading articles about wool or fibercraft techniques, for example, that can kind of trigger something in her mind. Oh, that links with this other thing I saw that I didn't realize it was a clue, but now I realize, yes, it was a clue.
Yeah. I also love that she is doing that as her job, because I think that was really clever of you, because you can add even more crafting elements to the story. So you're kind of hitting a double. You're upping the coziness and the cozy mystery reader expectations of, oh, we have the knitting, but we might also have this type of crafting as well.
I hope so. Yeah, that just sort of happened. I didn't really think that far ahead of, oh, if I make her an editor of a crafts magazine, I can always be doing these things. But then I wanted her to have a job where you can work from home.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, now everyone works from home. But when I started, not everyone, but when I started the series, the work from home was not really a thing. But I thought if she's having to go off to an office for a certain amount of time every day, how can she have time to solve these mysteries?
Yeah, that's very true. There's one mystery series in particular where I'm going, okay, this store would have closed down by now because I don't think
there.
I was like, you have never worked here for the whole 8-hour day. The feasibility, practicality of that one went out the window a long time ago.
Yeah, so that was part of it. And then there's a certain unrealistic quality often in cozy mysteries, and that is, where do these people get their money?
Yeah.
Because if you live in a beautiful town like this, thinking of what the property taxes are even like in the town where I live, which is this town. So yes, there's a certain suspension of disbelief, but she's a widow, and so in my mind there was perhaps a good insurance left when her husband was killed. And realistically, even one of my uncles was killed in a construction accident, and his children, I was in high school, but his children ended up getting Social Security. You know, if you lose a parent when you're a minor, that's one of the things that Social Security covers. You get a certain amount of money every month until you turn 18.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so no one has ever asked me, wait a minute, how does Pamela afford all of this? And who's paying for that college tuition? But that really realistically is something that her daughter would have gotten money after the father was killed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you really put a lot of thought into getting these details right, so that if someone asks, you're going, well, here's the answer. I got this.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're going, oh, I didn't consider that. So I like the fact that you're giving so much thought to each of these details. So that's something that I don't think you've explained in the book.
Well, no, I know.
But you know that as the author.
I know that in my mind. So if someone ever says, wait, how do they afford all of this? That's how they afford it.
Although I am curious now if there's something else that you know about the characters or the book that you created and you have these details for, but you just haven't shared them yet. So I'm curious if there's another off-the-page detail that you can share.
People are always asking me, of course, what's going to happen with Richard Larkin.
That's a very good question.
I refuse to reveal that, but people email me. It's just wonderful. People, could you please tell me, is she ever really going to get together with Richard Larkin? I got a wonderful email just a few days before I left for this conference of someone who had just read this one and said, I'm glad Richard Larkin isn't completely out of the picture yet. It's all a tease, of course. You have to keep, if you made that choice that your overarching story arc is going to be a romance theme, you have to keep that going, because once they're together, the suspense of that is totally over.
You don't think that you can then be like, are they going to have kids? Are they fighting about it? Is she's pregnant? What's going to happen?
You could, but in my mind, that's not, fighting about whether to have kids to me is not cozy. It's depressing. I mean, I'm sure there are many cozy mysteries where people are quite willing to have it, but in my mind, my books are the coziest of cozy mysteries, and I try never to introduce anything that would remind people of any problem they might have in their own life.
There are a lot of cozies currently that are more, I don't know if the word be grounded or trying to be realistic, but there was one about the sleuther having PTSD after finding 3 bodies because they want to have it be a representation of real life. She's a widow in your book, but in another book we have the widow who's still in the grieving process, and she's on that couch stuffing her face in the very beginning of the book, all upset and just living off of junk food and really struggling. And so people would take them in different ways, but at the same time they still end up in the cozy mystery subgenre. And so how do you approach wanting to make it like uplifting versus going, I want to ground this so hard in reality because I think I fall more under you, where I go, okay, I'm picking up a cozy mystery because I love the clever puns. I want to smile. I want something that's going to be lighthearted, and I know that justice is served at the end. I had a bad day. I don't really want to read about PTSD.
Well, yes, cozy means different things to different people. And to some people, it just means there's no horrifying scenes of violence.
Yeah.
And no extremely explicit scenes of sex. And people are using mild, if any, they might say, oh, hell, but they're not using stronger curse words. So yes, to some people that's what a cozy is. It's not people being eviscerated before your very eyes.
Yeah.
But in the very other extreme, I think of it as something where you're never reminded of any sad thing. No character would ever have a homeless child who's addicted to drugs or anything. It would just, many people have that sadness in their lives.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be reading a cozy mystery and all of a sudden be reminded of their own sorrows. They just want to think about food.
That's very true.
Pretty knitting projects and cats.
One of the things I love about cozies is that when I do have the bad day, I can fall into this cozy town that I want to be a citizen of, yet I'm not going to be the one murdered.
Never have to worry. You will never, ever have to worry that you're going to have any sad thing except somebody that nobody knows very well is getting murdered.
What is your writing process?
Well, I find that make the detailed outline that I make, the revision isn't one of these take it all apart and put it back together again processes at all. I write following my outline, and so I know that structurally that it's going to be fine. I'm not going to discover when I reread it that I've got a suspect who disappears midway through, or that I really needed to have a much stronger crime scene or whatever. So I don't need to do very much revision at all, and I can easily write 500 words a day. And if you write 500 words a day, in about 4 months, you've got a book. And then you have a couple of months even to revise if you feel you need to do that much revision. So but you have to consistently do the 500 words a day, or even just break it down by weeks.
Yeah.
At the end of this week, I want to have 3,000 words. So maybe one day some days go slower than others. Because some scenes are harder to write, of course. So I can be sitting there staring at the computer for 10 minutes trying to think of the right word. And other days it all flows extremely easily.
So do you typically write at home, or do you go to the cafe?
Oh, I write at home. No.
Is this a laptop, desktop?
I have a desk with a regular computer, not a laptop, with the tower.
Because I was trying to figure out if she's doing all this writing, how is she? Again, I find it very intriguing, the writing, behind the scenes process that you don't see. It's one of those, all of a sudden you just have the end result, you have the baby. Because I am fascinated by such a quick turnaround time, because that doesn't really lend itself to having an illness or having something happen in your private life or personal life that you're trying to overcome or cope with. And so you really have to be able to get your head in the writing game in that sort of situation. So I am curious if there's something you do to sort of say, okay, it's my time to write. I'm going to light this candle. I'm going to have my cup of tea in my writing mug. Like, do you have something to sort of set the tone of, I'm in the writing zone?
Well, I have my own separate room, just like my character has her office.
Yeah.
I call it my study, but we have an old house, just like her house. And we have 4 bedrooms. Our son has grown up now, and we have lots of extra bedrooms up there. And I have my own study. It's perfectly delightful. I have a really comfortable chair. I have the computer on a big long desk. I have bookshelves where I keep all of the books that my friends write, and reference books and all kinds of things like that, and filing cabinets, and I have all sorts of yarn creatures around. And
Did you have inspiration nearby?
Yeah, and I like to sit almost in the dark, except with only a light on the desk, because I don't like to be distracted. So I have shades on the window, and the shades are down. I go into my room, I close the door.
Oh, your little writing cave.
Yes, it is, and I suppose that's part of it. it becomes like a automatic psychological reaction.
Yeah.
Here I am in my comfortable chair in front of my computer, and now it's time to write. And I write late in the afternoon, which for many people that's nap time, but for some reason that's the time that I'm the most mentally alert. And I write for a few hours a day. And when it gets closer to the end, or if I'm revising or something, I might put in a much longer time. But for this stage of let's do the 500 words, and then I come downstairs and cook dinner. I love to cook. I find it extremely relaxing.
One of my go-to questions is always, are you a morning writer with your 5 a.m. writers club, or are you an evening writer with the night owl kind of tone going on? But you're in the middle. You're your own type of writer.
When I was doing academic writing, I drank so much coffee. It's just, I couldn't write without a cup of coffee. But it's different kind of thinking that goes into it, really. With that academic writing, you're always going back and forth between your notes and your research and what you want to turn this into and I used to write by hand actually when I did academic writing. It just seemed to flow out better. It was strange. But anyway, that was the coffee time. If I write at night, I get so excited I can't sleep. So
it makes sense.
Yeah.
I was going to say the logic of it is perfect. It's just a matter of going, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. But clearly your process works. So I did have a couple fun cozy mystery inspired this or that questions before you mentioned that you're a reader as well. So my thought process was, these are the cozy mysteries you would select as the reader.
Oh, I stopped reading mysteries when I started writing so intensively because I don't want to inadvertently be influenced. But I'll tell you, Krista Davis was one of my earliest Sisters in Crime friends, and I knew her mostly online because there was a. Now, Sisters in Crime still has a listserv, but it's different. When I was first in it, which was maybe 20 years ago, the format was a little bit different for the listserv. And there was, and perhaps still is, a group that calls itself the Guppies, the great unpublished authors. Guppies. And I was in the Guppies, Krista was in the Guppies, so many of my friends, because we were at that time all wannabes. And
it's odd to hear about Krista Davis being a wannabe because she's such a big name.
I know, she is a big name. And she was one of the first ones of us to get the contract, and that was for her Domestic Diva series.
Which is what, 18 books now?
Yeah, she's just going strong with that. So I read her Domestic Divas, and she is more in the school that I am. Everything is very pleasant and the town is beautiful, etc. And that really gave me a lot of good ideas about what I thought made a good cozy and what I would want to try to do in a cozy.
Yeah.
So that would be one example. It would be Krista's work. And mostly now I read nonfiction, but craft oriented.
Is there anything else in regards to your cozy mystery series or you as the author that you would like people to know about you or your book series?
Well, I hope they know that I have fun writing them.
I think it does come across. I think you can tell when a series is long like this one, you can tell that there's a special little spark about it because the readers are enjoying it, probably because the authors as well. I think that love of literature sort of shines through.
Well, and also, sometimes I like my characters as my imaginary friends better than I like my real friends.
Well, you can control everything they say and do.
I can.
They can't surprise you or throw any twists in there for you.
No, they're my best friends, especially Bettina. I wish I had a real Bettina in my life, and I don't. She's sort of based on a few people that I've known, though. There's no person really that's completely like her that I know.
But I mean, she's your brain baby if she is your friend. So for Cozy Mystery readers, where can they find you, find your books, and stay up to date with all of your coziness?
On my website, and it's my name, PeggyEhrhart.com. And I update it frequently. For every book, there's a separate page on my website. And you can find those in various ways. If you go to my website, the tabs across the top, one of them says Knit and Nibble Mysteries. And if you click on that, a page comes up with all the book covers, including the novella book covers. If you click on the book cover, then a whole new thing comes up that's just about that book. And it will be, again, the book cover, it will be the jacket blurb, cover blurb, it will be a link to order it from Amazon, link order from Barnes & Noble, link to order from that bookshop.org, which is the independent bookstores. It will be pictures of the knitting project. There's always a knitting project. And the recipe, there's always a recipe.
Yeah.
At the beginning, for the first few books, I just put pictures of the finished product of the knitting and the recipe. But then it occurred to me, oh, it could be fun to have some step-by-step.
Yeah.
So gradually for the later books, it becomes more complicated. So for a recipe, it might show a step that perhaps would be complicated, or here we are adding the eggs to the pudding or whatever, and then finished product, of course. And for the knitting, if it's something complicated, I'll put a little, very close-up little picture of casting on or
It makes
casting
sense,
off or
though.
something.
I mean, she's progressed as a knitter, therefore
Oh,
the
right.
reader will hopefully progress right
Yes.
alongside her.
Yes. So that's all on my website. And then I have a kind of blog feature on my website that I call Yarn Mania. And that is curious things made from yarn that I've come across in my estate sale prowls or rummage sales or just places where you can find interesting used homemade craft items.
Yeah.
And I add to that every couple months, but I have all sorts of pictures of that.
Yeah.
And also some of my own things. I also crochet, and the things that I like to crochet are those granny squares.
Oh.
And because it's very portable, you can just make them one at a time. And then you sew them all together and you have an afghan. So I restored a granny square afghan that my real grandmother made.
Oh, wow.
And that's up there. And I made then one of my own. It just took years. I started it long before I started writing these.
Yeah.
Or maybe I would have started a big knit project instead. But yes, I made 300 granny squares.
Wow.
And I sewed them all together to make an afghan. So that's up there.
Wow.
So just all sorts of things.
That's a
Homemade
lot of
craft
work.
things, but mostly things that other people have made that I've rescued. But some things that I've made.
Oh, no wonder you write crafting stories, because you enjoy them.
But that's the only kind of crochet I know how to do also, just those granny squares.
But they are beautiful at
They
the
are,
end result.
they are fun, yes. They're really fun.
We're chatting cozies, cozy mysteries.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Chatting Cozies podcast. Special thank you and shout out to Peggy Ehrhart for chatting all about cozy mysteries. Thank you again for listening, and as always, please stay safe, kind, and creative. And until next time, happy reading, writing, and sleuthing.
We're chatting cozies, cozy mysteries.